Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about life and how to live a good one. Today is February 25th, 2025, and this is episode 309, if I've got it right. Today, we are talking about, well, something we probably all heard, or we've maybe even said ourselves, which is, I wish things were like they used to be. Back when neighbors knew each other and families gathered every weekend and everybody ate dinner around the dinner table and life wasn't so complicated. But what I've been thinking about is, how often do our actions actually line up with that nostalgia? And is it even possible to recreate the old days in 2025, in today's world? So today we're going to talk a little bit about the old days that we say we want and why it's hard to go back to them, and maybe what we can do instead, and why we shouldn't feel guilty about any of it. But before we get to that, what has been happening on the lifestead? Well, last time I was talking to you, in last episode, I was talking about how cold it was. It had been like 40 below wind chills. Y'all, the last couple days, we've been up near the 50s, 50 above. Do the math on that. That is a temperature swing of a whole heck of a lot. And let me tell you, people aren't wearing coats. It's wild here. But the thing that the big warm up brings, besides the obvious awesomeness of the beautiful weather and the warm temps, is that all the snow is now melting. And so we have the big melt going on. We got lakes everywhere. This is the time of year that I feel like I have lakefront property. And the crazy thing is that our snowiest month here in Minnesota is traditionally March. So we're not even to the snowiest month of the year. So this could be a false kind of warm-up excitement, yay, melt everything. We could get dumped on again. We could get, 12, 18 inches of snow. I'm just putting it out there because y'all don't get mad. I'm just putting it out there because it could happen. If you are from Minnesota or anywhere near me, you know it can happen. My birthday is April 20th, and we have had everything from 80 degrees on my birthday to a blizzard on my birthday. So enjoy the warm-up, enjoy the mud, enjoy the mess. I am going to, but don't get too comfy, y'all. All right, what else? This past weekend, I went ice fishing again, and it was so super fun. There was probably 2 feet of ice where we were fishing. Lots of snow on top of the ice, too. Almost got stuck going out to where we were going to fish, but had a great time. I was there with my husband and my brother-in-law. We caught our limit of sunnies, and I even ended up catching 2 northerns, which was super fun because now that season is over in Minnesota. Northerns, no more northerns for a while till Mother's Day weekend, I believe. What else? I was dealing with a really weird case of hives this past week as well. I don't know what happened. I've never had hives before. And y'all, all of a sudden, my ankles and my shins were breaking out in these crazy itchy hives. And then my thighs were breaking out in these crazy itchy hives. I don't know what happened. It lasted for probably 4 days. I thought I was going to itch my skin raw. I haven't changed anything. I haven't changed soap. I was not wearing new socks or new jeans or like all the obvious things that you would check to be like, oh, I gotta not do that anymore because clearly I get hives from that. I don't know what it was. Some people said you just get hives because it's really cold. So that could make sense because it was super cold last week when we were talking. So maybe it was just my body going, you know what? I can't do 40 below. I can't do this. Maybe it's like a hormonal thing. I don't know what it was. They're much better now. I can still see them, but they're not as itchy. 2 things that I found to be really helpful with them was I did get some jewel weed soap from some friends of mine last year at a little event I was at. Fred and Sarah, thank you so much for that jewel weed soap because taking a bath and washing off with that soap was quite lovely, so thank you for that. Jewelweed is something that's really good for poison ivy and things like that, and so I just decided, you know what, I got hives and I'm itching, so I'm going to try that, and that was great. The other thing that helped was peppermint oil, of all things. I started looking in all my books, thinking, what can I do to soothe this itch? And it kept saying peppermint oil, obviously in a little bit of like olive oil, coconut oil, whatever it is that you're using to thin out your oil. You need a little carrier oil for that. But I was thinking that is going to burn like a son of a gun if I put it on. And I was just so miserable. I was like, screw it. I'm just going to try it. And I did it. And y'all, when you are itching crazy, and you put peppermint oil on that, that actually makes it feel better. Who would have thunk it? So there you go. This is not medical advice. I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what I did that happened to help. So there you are. What else? Farmish Papers March issue should be coming out shortly. I would say maybe in the next couple weeks it's going to be out. I'm a little behind because I forget that February is so short. I'm thinking for some reason I got, like 31 days and I don't. And you wouldn't think 3 days makes such a big difference, but it will be coming. The March issue is, of course, going to be part of the Tin Roof Review. That's kind of a tongue twister, isn't it? I wanted to say the Tin Woof Review. That would be a bunch of dog stuff, I guess. But the Tin Roof Review, which is a little bit of a maybe conspiracy, maybe controversy. It's the spicier of the newsletters that you can subscribe to. Of course, if you want to get in on that, you can subscribe to the whole Farmish collection, which is 3 different quarterly snail mail newsletters that I send out. I have a homesteading newsletter called the Farmish Papers. I have a faith-based newsletter called Faith and Fence Posts. And then, of course, the Tin Roof. Should I say roof? I don't know. That one will be coming out shortly. So if you want to get in on that, you can find out more information about that. Go to my website, afarmishkindoflife.com, and look up in the menu. It'll say something about snail mail newsletter. Otherwise, look in the show notes. And if I remember to put the link there, you will find it. What else? Peace, Love, and Bacon. That is my next book that's coming out. Book all about the homesteading life that we have lived here, kind of thoughts and stories and lessons and all that good stuff. Peace, Love, and Bacon. The cover is going to be worked on the week of March 10th. So we are getting closer. I made that date with my cover designer, so he will get to work on that week. So that's where we are in that process. I'm also working on a fiction book, but you didn't hear me say that. Okay. All right, let's head over to the main topic where we're going to talk about how we say we want to go back to the old days, but we can't go back to the old days. So here's what we're going to do instead. You know that you have said it. You've said something about how you long for the old days. Whether it's something you remember from your childhood or something from... Maybe you're thinking Ma Ingalls time. Maybe you're thinking about, coming out of the Great Depression and how people were just so resilient. And so whatever it is, right? You've probably said, I wish things were like they were back then. So today we're diving into why the idea of a simpler, more old-fashioned life feels so appealing and why it's actually hard to live that in 2025. We're also going to talk about what we can do to bring some of those values back in ways that might work for the world that we're in now. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about why is there that nostalgia? Why do we romanticize the good old days? We have the appeal of the simpler times. We say there's fewer distractions. We feel like the community ties were stronger. We feel like the pace of life was slower. We feel like families were just more connected. So that's what we think of when we're talking about, I want to go back to the good old days, right? Maybe you are thinking about family get-togethers where all the kids were running around outside. All the cousins were playing together and the grown-ups were talking inside. The ladies was in the kitchen getting everything ready. The guys were doing their talking or whatever they were doing. No one was glued to their phones. They were all having conversations. It felt real. And so we think about those things. It's a way to escape today's overwhelm. I think that's some of the reason where we kind of think back to the good old days because we're overwhelmed with today, right? So we want to think about when were things simpler, when were things better. And so there's kind of this psychological comfort that comes with nostalgia. The thing is that our brain often filters out what the hard parts of the past might have been. So like social pressures or having limited resources or various things like that. But we like to think about the good parts, and that's what we focus on. So when we talk about I want to go back to the good days, the good old days. That's what our brain is thinking about. But why can't we have the old days right now? Why won't that work in 2025? What's different now that makes it really hard to have those good old days now? I think one of the things that's different is that there's been a pretty big shift in society and culture. Families now are more spread out across the states. You're probably not going to see your entire family driving 10 minutes, right? Everybody is spread out. They're spread out across the state. Sometimes they're spread out into different countries, right? We have this mobility and this ability to spread out across the planet, and a lot of people have done that. So that makes it a little bit harder to be connected like we were. I feel like there are more work demands now. I feel like people are busier than ever, and it's really hard to prioritize community, sometimes over survival, I would say. Maybe some people would say, I can't get involved with the community because I'm just trying to work to pay my bills, and so it's really hard to prioritize community when you feel like you're in that situation. I feel like the internet is a big part of it. The internet has really replaced local gatherings and having those spots for connection, because we just hop online and we talk to people. We hop online and we send messages to people. We don't have to have those local gathering spots anymore for connection because it's just quicker to do it online. But online lacks the depth, I guess, of face-to-face interaction. And then something else that often comes up when we talk about the good old days and the difference now is the perceived safety concerns and the perceived trust concerns. There are a lot of people now who will say, I'm not going to send my kids to the neighbor's house unsupervised. I wouldn't do that in 2025. I'm not going to let my kids walk down the road. I'm not going to let, all the things that would have been okay when I was little that people really wouldn't even have thought about as an issue. There are a lot of people now who will say, we would never let our kids do that because it's not as safe. You've probably heard me talk in past podcasts about how, I don't know, I got some things to say about that, but that's a whole nother podcast topic, so we're not going to go there. So those are some of the reasons that I feel like society and culture has kind of shifted in a way that makes it hard to make the old days return, or the feeling or the structure of the old days come back in 2025. I feel like another thing is that we kind of contradict ourselves. We say we want a simpler life. We say we want the slower life. We say we want the benefits that come along with that. But let's be real. We also really like having Amazon Prime. We also really like having DoorDash, if you have the ability to get that. We like the fact that we have things like Instant Pots, right? We like that we have these modern conveniences. So we say we want a simpler life, but we also like the conveniences that we have now. I think that modern conveniences have made us less willing to sacrifice our time or sacrifice effort for things like handmade meals or regular family meetups, because those things take time and they take work, and we know there's an easier, faster way to do them now. And so we're not always willing to sacrifice the time because sometimes we don't have it. You see what I'm saying? I also think that one thing, we say we want the simple life. We say we want to do it face to face. We say we want to have these long conversations where we just, spend the afternoon with our family talking about this, that, and the other thing with our extended families. But technology is ingrained in how we work and how we socialize, even how we homestead, right? The technological advances and everything that comes along with that is just ingrained in us now. And so that makes it hard to think about going back or the things that come along with a simpler life. Something I think we don't talk about enough when we talk about, I want to go back to the old days, is that I feel we very often will cherry pick the past. I think there are a lot of realities that occurred in yesteryear that we don't want to talk about, or we just kind of want to hide. We want to poo-poo and just send those away, right? So we want the good parts of 1870 or 1950 or whatever the time is that you have in your head when you are thinking, oh, I wish it could be like da-da-da. I wish we could go back to da-da-da. Things were so much better when whatever, right? While we remember family dinners and close-knit communities and all of that, everyday life back then was hard. I mean, if you want to talk about like health and lifespan, there are times in the past when there was a real high infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate. We had outbreaks of different diseases. We had not great access to modern healthcare. I mean, healthcare, that can be a whole nother podcast topic, right? We got diseases now that didn't exist back in the day, but we also now don't have to deal with issues, diseases, and I'm not even talking vaccination here. I don't want to go down that road. But do you see what I'm saying? There are things, if you got them back in the day, it was a real problem. If you get them now, people don't even think about it. Like, there are ways to deal with it now. And however you feel about that, that's like a whole nother podcast episode. But it's something we don't talk about. There are things we don't have to worry about killing us now that was a real worry back in the day when people were eating family dinners around the dinner table. You know what I'm saying? Another thing that has changed that we don't sometimes think about is work conditions for a lot of people are completely different. We think about that time when families were gathering around the table. Some of those guys were coming in to eat at that table, and they were coming in from some really harsh work situations, some real labor-intensive work situations. Factories, farms, mines, a lot of different things were operating under unsafe conditions, long hours, no labor protection, totally different than now. We've got things a little better now. Do you know what I'm saying? So yes, we were eating dinner around the table together, but when we left the dinner table, here's the other things we were dealing with. Before this digital age, or whatever you want to call it, the fact that we didn't have as much modern technology, it meant that our daily to-do list, our daily tasks, the things that we were doing required way more effort, way more physical effort, way more time. Communication was slower. Transportation was less efficient. Information was way harder to come by. And people could often feel more isolated. Even though it appears that everything was more simple, I think there were probably situations where people felt more isolated. I also think something, to keep in mind is that this nostalgia for simpler times can kind of overshadow the economic instability that was a part of the past. Not that we are out of the woods, do you know what I'm saying? But this is not the Great Depression. We are not waiting in bread lines. The agricultural markets were volatile. There were huge shifts that came because of events like the Great Depression. There were people who were so financially insecure. There was economic hardship where everyday realities, there wasn't. We have so many modern conveniences now that can alleviate those, whether that is groups that can help us, whether that is government assistance, whether there's just things that exist now that you can tap into that did not exist back in the day. I don't know how you feel about that. Once again, this podcast episode could probably spur 13 different podcast episodes after it. I'm just saying there are some differences that we often don't talk about when we think, oh, I want to go back to the old days. Here's another thing. When we think about the past, the kind of Norman Rockwell painting of the past, we have this like traditional values. It's very warm. It's very like, oh, family and all that. But it tends to gloss over. There were all these like constraints of that time. There were cultural constraints. There were social constraints. There were these like rigid gender roles. There was limited personal freedoms. There were these social expectations. And while there are probably aspects of life that seemed simpler, there was also this stifling of individuality and progress for a lot of different people. Again, that could be a whole nother conversation. I'm just saying, it seemed like it was simple, but there was all this other stuff that came along with it. So when we come to today and we're trying to live an old-fashioned life in 2025, or we're trying to live a more simple life, and we're looking back at how things used to be, the Norman Rockwell version, the part that's not taking into account all the cherry-picked stuff, rose-colored glasses, I'm going to live a simpler life, I'm going to live, like it was. It can almost feel like we're swimming upstream. We're like, why isn't this working? And I think we need to check ourselves. We say things like, I really want more connection. I really want to be more connected with people. I really want to have these conversations. But when is the last time you answered a phone call instead of texting someone back? You see what I'm saying? We kind of contradict ourselves. So how can we adapt the old values or the pieces of simplicity that we want to pull out? How can we add them to modern life? I think there are a few options, a few things that we can do. I think number one, we can focus on kind of the essence of it, the feeling of it, and not necessarily the details. When we talk about connecting like they did in the old days, connection doesn't have to look like some 1950s dinner party or some old school, town potluck, summer gathering. It could mean a standing video call with faraway family and friends. Or it could be hosting a really casual get-together once a month. You're grabbing the essence of that connection. You're not trying to recreate the details, which might be real hard to do now, 80 years later, almost 80 years later. We can simplify our lives in ways that make sense for today. If you just feel like things are overwhelming, you can decide, you know what, I don't need the unnecessary noise, and I'm going to figure out what the unnecessary noise is, and I'm going to just get away from that. I'm going to unsubscribe from that unnecessary noise. Maybe you're going to start prioritizing real life experiences over virtual ones. I don't know. The way that you hear this podcast episode is going to absolutely depend on where you are in your life, what you're doing, what's going on, what you have available to you, what the issues are. So I'm just putting it all out there, okay? Another thing we can do is take small intentional steps. And we talked about this last week when I was talking about when you say you want to get healthier, that doesn't mean you automatically go out and get a gym membership and overhaul your whole eating plan and just make it this huge thing. No, you want to get healthier? Go take a walk for 5 minutes. Make it a tiny step forward. Drink one more glass of water. Choose a somewhat healthier snack when you go to the kitchen. Instead of the thing you were going to grab, make a little bit healthier choice. Make it tiny, right? So this is the same thing, taking small, intentional steps, committing to one change, like deciding, you know what, I'm going to share a meal with some friends this week. Or just practice being present. I don't know, you're sitting in the living room and you're talking with your family, but 3 of the 4 of you have your phones in your hand and you're scrolling Facebook or you're checking your email or your whatever while you're talking to your family. Maybe we don't do that anymore. Maybe we put the phone down. Maybe you need to reimagine what community looks like. Maybe your community doesn't look like a tight-knit small town. Maybe that's not possible for you. Maybe your community is a mix of some local relationships and some online relationships. Maybe we decide we are going to build relationships with people who are nearby locally, even if they don't share all of our same interests. Maybe the thing that we share is that we're nearby each other. The whole thing about the internet is it made it very easy for us to cherry pick our community, which is really awesome in some ways, but it's made it so we only want to associate with or communicate with people who are very, very similar to us. And that maybe wasn't the best thing, right? Something else I think we can do is accept what is different about today and realize that's okay. I think we need to recognize that modern life is not all bad. It's not all bad. We have opportunities now that were not possible decades ago. We have connections now that were not possible decades ago. Don't write off modern life. Modern life is pretty awesome in a lot of ways. I think we need to let go of the guilt that we have about not living the old-fashioned way perfectly. I think we make it work for 2025 without being mad that it's not how it would have been in 1970, 1950, 1940, 1870, whatever it is that your perfect fantasy old-fashioned life is. And I think it's also valid to realize that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents might have thought the same exact thing that we're thinking now. Oh man, I wish we could go back to... It's not just us. And I don't know, because obviously I wasn't alive back then, to be able to have an actual conversation, sit down and have coffee with someone and ask them these questions. But there had to be a point in time where people didn't want to go back. Like, you could not have paid them to go back when they would sit and have coffee with you and say, I am so glad that we are out of that time. And I think some of us now are so far removed from that stuff that we don't even think about that anymore. And we've all got different histories to look back on, so that is going to determine a lot of what I don't ever want to go back to that time means for you. But you get what I'm saying. It's easy to romanticize something when you're removed from it. And that can mean the past or it can mean the future, because we can say all this about the future as well. You can imagine what the future is going to be like because you're going to have this, this, and this, and you won't have to deal with that, and that anymore, but you never realize what's going to come along with all of that, or what those changes are going to spider web out into and affect in ways that you never even thought of. So this has to do with the past as much as it has to do with the future. I think really what we need to do is find peace in the present. And for me, I've had to realize that chasing the past is not the answer. Instead, what I need to do is take what I really loved about the good old days and make it fit where I am now. And that can look like a lot of different things. It might look like you're baking bread for your family, or maybe it means you buy a loaf from the store, but you eat it together at the table. I don't know. You have to make that decision for yourself. What are the things you loved about the good old days, and how can you make it fit in 2025? Maybe you invite a bunch of your friends over. Maybe you invite your brother-in-law and sister-in-law over for a bonfire, and you didn't dig the pit yourself. You went and bought one of those little fire pit things at the store, and you got your marshmallow roasters, and you really wanted a lot of people to come over, but you know what? The only people that could come over is one couple, and you know what? That's fine. It's fine. You're connecting with them. It's not going to be a big thing. It's fine. Maybe it means you're going out ice fishing, and that's just what you're doing. And you know what? You're connecting. That's what you're doing. Maybe you decide you are going to meet up with a friend, or you're going to meet up with your grandma, or you're going to meet up with your cousin, and you're going to bring donuts. And you know what? You didn't bake them. Maybe you bought them on the way to their house from Quick Trip. You stopped at the gas station. You picked up some Dunkers, right? But you know what? You're going to sit and have coffee and donuts while you talk to your grandma or your cousin or some friend you haven't seen in years. Maybe that's what it looks like now. It's just tiny steps forward while trying to grasp some essence of what you loved about the past. I think part of our issue is that we forget about balance. You don't need to reject everything modern to honor old-fashioned values. You don't have to reject 2025 to like some things about 1950. And simpler doesn't mean living in the past. It means cutting out what doesn't matter and focusing on what does. And what that specifically means is different for every single person. And maybe in trying to figure this out, it means you have to stay away from folks who are obsessive about old-fashionedness or really rigid about their old-fashionedness, or they're really judgmental about people's lack of old-fashionedness or what they think is old-fashionedness. Maybe that means you can't be in a certain online group because it just makes you feel like you're not doing it right. Or maybe that means you need to stop hanging out with a certain group of doers because it makes you feel like you're not doing enough. I don't know. Your life is your life. And whether you are genuine and authentic to the methods of a 1950s kitchen or a 1930s farm, it has zero to do with anyone else. This is your life. You figure out how to make it work. I also think there's a realization that people come to this wanting to live an old-fashioned life or family-oriented life or community-oriented life, whatever it is. I feel like people come to this at different phases in their life. And I think that's really important to recognize because not everybody is there, and there's nothing wrong with that. People are at different phases in their life. If you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be living the life that I'm living now, I would have been like, what? I'm busy. I got stuff to do. Maybe, I don't know. I can't do math right now. Young adult, I would have been like, come on now. I mean, family was always important, but not like it is now, right? I think things happen in our life. There's different phases. I think that's a really important part of this conversation. We come back to it at different times, depending on what we're going through and where we are. All right, so this whole old-fashioned thing, right? Trying to go back to the old days. Let's end with a little encouragement here, okay? We can't go back to the good old days, but we can take the best parts of them and create something meaningful in 2025. And don't worry about doing it perfectly. Don't worry about trying to look like a Norman Rockwell painting. Don't worry about that stuff. Focus on what feels right for you and your family because you all are the ones who are living this. Not for the neighbor. It's not for your grandma. It's not for whoever. It's for you. You are the ones who have to do this and live with this. So you guys make the decisions for what works. Maybe you're not trying to recreate anything. Maybe you're just trying to live your life and be a decent person and love your family and your friends, and it looks like what it looks like, and that's just what it is. And maybe that's also what people were doing in 1950 and 1870 and 1732 or whatever, and it just looked different. And we need to do the things that work in 2025. Will there be overlap? Will some of it maybe look like it did in 1950? Sure. But is it going to be exactly the same? No. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I would invite you this week to think about one old-fashioned value that you really want to cling to. And maybe value is the wrong word. Just like something you think is really important. Maybe it's family dinners. Maybe it's connecting with whatever it is. Okay? I feel like so much of this has to do with in-person connection. I feel like very often that's what people say they feel like they're lacking. But if that's not what it is for you, whatever it is that you look back at the good old days and you think, oh, I wish we had that. I want you to think of one of those things and figure out how you can adapt it to your modern life. Maybe you want to have extended family dinners. And maybe you decide once a month or every other month, you're going to host a dinner at your house or you're going to host it out on your lawn. You're like, my house ain't big enough to have people. Maybe I got dogs that drive people, whatever it is. You're like, I would have people over when the weather's nice. We'll have a picnic outside. It'll be great. Awesome. Okay. And you put the call out to your extended family and you see who comes. And you don't freak out that other people are in a different place in their life or they have different commitments right now. And it's not a judgment call. It's just an opportunity to have a meal together on your front lawn. That's all. That would be awesome, right? So I don't know what it is for you, but you think about it. And then I would love it if you would share your thoughts with me. You can either, if you're on YouTube listening, put it in the comments. Otherwise, email me. Amy@afarmishkindoflife.com or find me on social media. Let me know what it is that you are going to try to adapt to your modern life. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you found this podcast episode helpful, or maybe it'll make you think a little bit, or maybe it allowed you to take a little breath and be like, you know what? I really don't have to make this look like 1950. And I've been struggling with it. And the reason it's not working is because it's not supposed to. It's not 1950 anymore. Thank you, Amy, for pointing that out. All right. I hope you guys have a great week. I will talk to you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com, find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media, or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay Farmish.